James Whitaker stood off to the side of the crowded high school gymnasium in Wichita, Kansas, feeling both proud and nervous as he watched his daughter Lily cross the stage to receive her diploma. He had envisioned this moment for years. Cap tossed into the air, family cheering, tears of joy, proof that his sacrifices as a single father after Marissa's long bouts of emotional distance had been worth it. Yet when Lily's proud smile met his in the front row, his relief twisted into confusion as he spotted Marissa remaining seated, her face pale and her eyes distant. The principal's voice boomed through the loudspeaker, congratulating the class of 2025, and James joined in the applause, determined to make this day about Lily. He caught Marissa's gaze, hoping for a reassuring nod, but she offered none. When Lily returned to her seat, James turned to Marissa. She rose slowly, clutching her purse, and the gym fell silent as dozens of families noticed her standing. "I've decided today is as good a day as any to tell you all," she said, her voice tight with emotion and almost drowned out by the sudden hush. "I'm leaving James. For someone else." A gasp rippled across the bleachers. Phones were raised, whispers floated like dust motes in the warm summer air, and Lily's face drained of color. James felt his heart stutter, but he did not interrupt. He steeled himself, reached into his inner jacket pocket, and withdrew a crisp, sealed envelope. He placed it gently on the empty seat beside Marissa without a word, meeting her startled eyes with a calm that surprised even him. "Read this later," he said quietly, voice steady enough that it carried through the stunned room. Then he turned back to Lily, offering her a small, comforting smile. "This day is still yours," he told her softly, and took her hand as they watched Marissa slip out the side door, her words hanging in the air like the echo of betrayed promises. Leaving the auditorium, James felt the July heat of Kansas like a baptism, scorching but awakening, and he welcomed it. For the first time in months, he felt clear-headed. As he guided Lily toward their car, he replayed in his mind the careful steps he had taken over the past year, the anonymous transfers he had traced, the lawyer he had quietly consulted, the preemptive paperwork he had filed. He resolved in that moment that though the world thought he was caught off guard, he had actually planned this reveal to coincide with Lily's graduation, ensuring the truth would emerge on the grandest stage. He refused to let Marissa's betrayal overshadow his daughter's triumph, and as they reached the parking lot, he placed a reassuring arm around Lily's shoulders. The envelope remained unopened for now, a silent promise of surprises yet to come, and James knew the real story. His story was only just beginning. After the graduation ceremony, James guided Lily through the crowded hallway, her mortarboard still in her hand and her shoulders slumped with shock, while he kept his gaze steady on the floor, thinking through each step of his plan. They reached the parking lot in heavy silence, broken only by the distant chatter of families celebrating in their cars. James unlocked their old sedan, made sure Lily was safe inside, then climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. The air conditioning kicked on, but neither spoke as he pulled out of the school lot and navigated the familiar streets leading to their modest home on Maple Street. As they drove, James allowed his mind to drift back to the moment he had slipped the envelope beside Marissa's seat. How her dress had caught the light just so, how her breath had caught in her throat, and how the gym's overhead speaker had amplified her voice for every family to hear. He stole a glance at Lily in the rearview mirror. Her eyes, so like Marissa's once had been, flickered with a mix of fury and sorrow. When they arrived home, the front door stood ajar as if in silent invitation. James stepped onto the porch, his heart thudding, and called into the empty house. "Lily, I'm just grabbing us some water from the kitchen." Though he knew the house was empty of anything but his daughter and the evidence of Marissa's long absence. Inside, he heard only the soft hum of the refrigerator, and the overhead light in the hallway buzzed faintly. He paused at the threshold, listening, then walked to the kitchen, where he poured 2 glasses of ice water and carried them back into the living room, where Lily sat on the couch, envelope open in her lap, and her eyes scanning its contents. He sat beside her and watched her fingers trace the lines of bank statements, emails from a private investigator, and a printed text conversation that detailed Marissa's rendezvous with her unnamed lover. He saw her lips part as she read how Marissa had steadily siphoned money from their joint account for nearly a year, and how every transfer lined pockets of a secret account James had quietly uncovered. "Dad," Lily whispered, her voice trembling but steadying. "She planned all this?" He nodded, swallowing hard to keep his voice calm. "I confronted her privately weeks ago. She denied everything. But once I saw the paper trail, I hired someone to dig deeper." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I only waited to confront her after your graduation, so you could finish strong." Lily's eyes watered as she closed the envelope with a soft snap and set it on the coffee table. She looked up at her father. "You must have known she'd pick this day to hurt us the most." James exhaled slowly. "I did. That's why I planned my own reveal today." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small USB drive. "There's more on this," he said, handing it to her. Lily's brow furrowed. "What is it?" "Recorded conversations," James replied. "She thought I never listened, but I recorded her admissions to the investigator. You'll see her say she wasted no time making new plans, how she used our savings to buy plane tickets and hotel rooms for two. I wanted tangible proof." He paused, noticing the slight flicker of fear in Lily's eyes. "I haven't shown this to the school or anyone else, yet." Lily's hand trembled as she took the drive. "Why?" she asked. "Because I want you to decide if you want to share our story or keep this private." The mystery hung between them. Would the secret recordings become public or remain a weapon held in reserve? Lily met her father's gaze, pride replacing sorrow, and said, "Let's see everything first." James closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." He stood and walked to the dining room table where he'd already laid out his laptop. He opened it, inserted the drive into a USB port, and waited for the folder to appear. On the screen, dozens of audio files populated the window, each named with dates and timestamps. Lily came over and pointed at the file labeled June 14 Key Confession. James double-clicked, and the first recording began to play. Marissa's voice, clear and unguarded, echoed through the speakers as she described to an unknown listener how she had redirected Marissa's own credit card rewards to pay for that romantic weekend in Topeka. Lily's eyes widened at the betrayal laid bare. She pressed pause. "She thought she was smart," Lily said quietly, "but she slipped up when she mentioned my scholarship fund." James sighed. "I caught that. It gave me the leverage to freeze those accounts." He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "Next step is meeting with the attorney this afternoon to file the divorce petition. We'll ask the court to enforce the infidelity clause in our prenup. That clause will ensure she loses any claim to the house or our savings." Lily swallowed. "Will she fight it?" James gave a wry smile. "She can try, but we'll have the recordings and the bank statements. Judge won't ignore that." He picked up his glass and took a sip of water, considering the road ahead. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard, and the air felt thick with promise and retribution. Lily stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the street where families still drove past, oblivious to the storm brewing next door. "Dad," she said, turning back, "what about Mom? Do you ever think she'll regret this?" James joined her at the window and put an arm around her shoulders. "If she does, the chance for regret will pass when she loses everything. Then she'll know what it feels like to give up what matters most." He paused, looking at the envelope and the drive on the table. "For now, we keep this between us." Lily nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "I won't let her ruin my life." James kissed her forehead. "You're stronger than she ever was." They stood there together, father and daughter poised on the brink of the next act, knowing the evidence in the envelope and on the drive would be their secret power, and that the real drama was yet to unfold. That same afternoon, James drove Lily to the small law office in downtown Wichita, where he met with his attorney, Mr. Granger, in a narrow conference room whose walls were lined with leather-bound case files. Mr. Granger nodded gravely as James laid out the envelope's contents and the USB drive, then explained his plan. File a divorce petition immediately, serve Marissa with the papers at her mother's house, and include a motion to freeze all joint assets under the prenup's infidelity clause. Lily watched from the corner of the room, her graduation cap folded neatly on her lap, and James felt a surge of pride at her composure. By evening, they had signed the divorce petition. complete with exhibits. The bank statements showing the monthly transfers into Marissa's secret account, the printed text messages arranging weekend trips, and the audio files of Marissa's own voice, admitting she had wasted no time spending their savings. Mr. Granger prepared the summons for service, and James left the office feeling both drained and resolute. He dropped Lily at home, promising to explain everything after dinner, then drove across town to the private investigator's small apartment where a tired but satisfied man handed over a thick folder of surveillance photos. Marissa and her lover checking into a Wichita hotel under assumed names, tickets for a flight to Kansas City tucked into her purse, and receipts from upscale restaurants that matched the dates on the transfers. James thanked him, tucked the folder into his briefcase, and returned to the quiet house on Maple Street, where Lily was waiting in the living room, tears in her eyes as she saw her father walk in. He sat beside her, opened the folder, and went through each photo aloud, her mother laughing over champagne, slipping a hand into the man's jacket pocket, whispering into his ear. Lily hugged the photos to her chest and asked softly, "Will she really lose the house?" James patted her back. "She signed that prenup herself. Once the court sees this evidence, it will enforce the infidelity clause. She'll forfeit her claim to our home, our retirement savings, even her share of the cars." Lily nodded, wiping her eyes. "Good," she said. That night, James barely slept. He reviewed every document, bank records, affidavits, recordings, photos, to ensure nothing could be challenged. Before dawn, he called Mr. Granger to file the motion for a temporary restraining order, which would freeze the accounts and bar Marissa from selling or transferring property until the final hearing. With the court clerk's confirmation in hand, he felt the first real pulse of victory. Over the next week, a quiet war unfolded. Marissa's mother tearfully handed her the divorce summons on her front porch, marble steps slick with early morning dew, and Marissa screamed wordlessly as she read the notice. The official court stamp glared accusingly at her. Case number 2025-DIV-0893. She slammed the door in her mother's face and sped off in the convertible, tires squealing on the pavement, but the bank freeze left her unable to fill the tank. Neighbors spotted her walking miles to the nearest gas station, humiliation etched in her posture. Meanwhile, James met with a financial advisor to set up a separate account for Lily's college fund, funded entirely by the joint assets that Marissa could no longer touch. He signed papers that morning, transferring the remaining joint savings into a trust for Lily, a measure Mr. Granger had recommended to ensure no future garnishment. That afternoon, James went to Lily's high school to arrange for her to receive her scholarship checks directly into that trust, surprising the school administrator who had expected the funds to go into her mother's account. On the drive home, James allowed himself a small smile. He was turning Marissa's own betrayal into a secure future for his daughter. Over the next month, Marissa filed a flurry of motions. Contest the prenup's validity, dismiss the surveillance evidence as illegally obtained, challenge the recordings as inadmissible. But each time, Mr. Granger responded with meticulous legal briefs, citing Georgia recording laws and Kansas rulings on prenuptial infidelity clauses. The judge reviewed the briefing schedule and set a preliminary hearing date, giving each side 2 weeks to submit their final exhibits. During that time, James spent evenings teaching Lily to drive in the empty church parking lot, her laughter echoing against the brick walls as she shifted gears. He reminded her gently that their new life would be different, but still full of hope, and Lily smiled through the tears, determined. One afternoon, as James worked late in his home office, the doorbell rang. He opened the door to find Marissa's sister, Ellen, standing on the porch with a casserole and a worried expression. Ellen had always been close to Marissa, but now looked to James for the truth. He invited her in and, over chicken and rice, showed her the evidence, the bank statements, the text messages, the photos. Ellen's eyes filled with tears as she realized Marissa had lied about everything, even to her. She left with a promise to testify that Marissa had confided in her about the affair last winter and vowed to support James's claims in court. That secret witness was the bombshell James had kept hidden until the last moment. 2 days before the preliminary hearing, Mr. Granger filed the witness list, including Ellen's affidavit, and served Marissa with the deposition notice. Now, Marissa faced not only cold documents, but the testimony of her own sister. On the morning of the hearing, James and Lily arrived at the courthouse in crisp suits, him in navy, Lily in a smart blazer over her graduation dress, the tassel still pinned to her shoulder. They walked into the courtroom together, a united front, and took their seats. Marissa entered later, wearing an expensive dress but carrying herself with fear, as if each step triggered a new humiliation. Mr. Granger approached the bench and reminded the judge of the pending motions, the freeze on assets, the infidelity clause, the admissibility of evidence, and the deposition of Ellen. The judge listened intently, eyes flicking between James's calm face and Marissa's shaky one. When the judge called the matter, Mr. Granger asked to present oral arguments. He spoke clearly, walking through each point, the unbroken chain of bank records, the recorded confessions, the photos and text messages, and the sister's affidavit. He asked the judge to rule immediately to prevent further financial harm to Lily and to grant the temporary orders. The judge leaned back, reviewed her notes, then pronounced that she would maintain the asset freeze, enforce the prenup's infidelity clause for the duration of the proceedings, and permit Ellen's deposition on the scheduled date. Marissa's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. James glanced at Lily, who sat upright, hands folded calmly on her lap. After the hearing, Marissa's lawyer approached James in the hallway, his voice low and urgent. Your evidence was overwhelming. She may have grounds to appeal the prenup later, but for now, she's left with nothing. Marissa herself followed, eyes red and tear-streaked, and muttered, "You win." James said nothing, simply gathered Lily's hand and led her out into the bright Kansas sun. As they reached the courthouse steps, he looked down at Lily, her strength beating in her chest, and realized the greatest revenge was not in punishment, but in justice and protection. The hidden bombshell of Ellen's testimony had shattered Marissa's last line of defense, and now every step they took was toward a new life, built on security and truth. After the judge's ruling, enforcing the asset freeze and admitting Ellen's deposition, James and Lily walked out of the courthouse with a renewed sense of purpose. But the real work had only just begun. Over the next few days, James coordinated with Mr. Granger to prepare for Ellen's testimony, gathering additional corroborating evidence to strengthen her statements. Including the handwritten note Marissa had secretly written to her lover in January, confessing that, "I'll finally be free of everything once I have you," which James had discovered among Marissa's discarded papers, and a copy of airline boarding passes showing Marissa's trips to a remote cabin retreat where she and the man had plotted their getaway. Armed with this, Ellen felt confident when she arrived at the small conference room for her deposition, where the court reporter clicked on the tape recorder and began transcribing her solemn recollection of Marissa's behaviors. The late-night calls, the coded appointments, the moments when Marissa would slip out in the early hours, claiming insomnia, but actually sneaking out to meet him, while Marissa, sitting just outside the room in the hall, trembled with each click of the recorder, overhearing Ellen's every word through the thin door, realizing for the first time that her own sister was willing to condemn her publicly. The following week, Mr. Granger filed the deposition transcript, and the court date for the full hearing was set, giving both sides exactly 30 days to submit final briefs and witnesses. During that time, James and Lily continued their daily routines. Lily attended summer orientation at the local community college, where she applied for a part-time work-study position funded by the trust James had established in her name. And James returned to his office at Caldwell Financial Transitions, where he took on a new client, a single mother navigating bankruptcy, and found renewed meaning in helping others avoid the financial pitfalls he had once weathered himself. Yet even as they immersed themselves in these healthier patterns, James never let his guard down, spending late nights reviewing every piece of evidence to ensure there were no loopholes. While Lily, inspired by their shared victory so far, began drafting a letter to the school board proposing a scholarship for students from broken homes, using the documentation she had gathered during the divorce process as a basis for her argument that financial security affects academic success. Meanwhile, Marissa, desperate to stay afloat financially, had taken a job at a local cafe under a pseudonym And one afternoon, the cafe's regular customers spotted her through the window and alerted James's old college roommate, Daniel, who had once been best man at their wedding and now worked as a city planning official. Daniel recognized Marissa's signature gait and discreetly informed James of her new employment. And when James visited the cafe under the guise of grabbing an iced coffee, he encountered Marissa behind the counter, her face paling when she saw him in line. And though she attempted to ignore him, James calmly ordered 2 drinks, handed the barista a bill, and asked her to keep the remaining change for Lily's scholarship fund. His subtle act of reclaiming her earnings without confrontation was the next layer of quiet revenge. And Marissa's cheeks burned with humiliation as she watched the coins drop into the jar labeled Lily Whitaker Scholarship. As the hearing date loomed, Mr. Granger suggested conducting a mock trial in his office to prepare James and Lily for the courtroom environment. And together they practiced responding to tough questions, anticipating Marissa's likely strategy to claim they had entrapped her, only to be met with the mountain of admissible proof James had amassed. And when, during this rehearsal, Lily was asked by Mr. Granger if she had lost any love for her mother, she paused for only a moment, then declared firmly, "Love doesn't mean trust," a statement that brought both James and Mr. Granger to tears at its quiet power. On the eve of the hearing, James received one final unexpected piece of information from the private investigator: the name and address of Marissa's lover, a wealthy art dealer from Kansas City who had discreetly financed many of her luxury expenses, only to abandon her when he learned of the court's freeze. And this revelation was the last bombshell James filed in an addendum to their brief, exposing the lover's fraudulent business practices, which Mr. Granger argued would not only reflect poorly on Marissa's judgment, but also justify an additional claim for punitive damages for emotional distress under Kansas law. The morning of the hearing, a Thursday with blue skies streaked by wispy clouds, James and Lily arrived at the courthouse dressed in their best clothes. James in a charcoal gray suit whose jacket pockets bulged with copies of every exhibit, and Lily in a crisp white blouse and navy skirt, carrying a binder labeled evidence, her posture straight and her gaze unwavering as she walked beside her father into the courtroom. Inside, the gallery was packed with reporters, neighbors, and curious onlookers drawn by the sensational story. Stories of the woman who had stood up in her daughter's graduation ceremony and proclaimed her intent to abandon her family, followed by the upheaval of her secret finances and the siege of the legal battle that followed. Judge Reynolds presided once more, reviewing the docket in solemn silence until she looked up and cleared her throat, signaling the start of the hearing. Mr. Granger opened with a concise statement of facts: the timeline of Marissa's clandestine transactions, the deposition of Ellen, the photographs of the hotel rendezvous, and the new evidence of the art dealer's fraudulent schemes, all marshaled to show a pattern of deliberate deceit. Marissa's attorney attempted to object to the admission of the art dealer evidence, claiming it was irrelevant and prejudicial. But Judge Reynolds overruled, stating that it went directly to Marissa's character and the gravity of her choices, calling it a compelling context for the court's consideration. Then Lily was called as a witness, escorted by her father to the stand, and with a calm maturity that belied her age, she recounted in simple terms what she had experienced: the shock of her mother's announcement, the betrayal of the hidden transfers, and the emotional toll of watching the woman she loved choose a secret life over her own family. When asked how she felt, Lily paused, glanced at her father's supportive nod, and said quietly, "I felt lost, but I also learned I could stand on my own." A statement that drew a hush over the courtroom and left Marissa's attorney unable to mount any further cross-examination. The final witness was the private investigator, who testified briefly about his methods and confirmed the authenticity of the hotel photos and the boarding passes. Then, Mr. Granger concluded with a request that the court not only uphold the prenup's infidelity clause for the final asset division, but also award James full custody of Lily without visitation restrictions, citing Marissa's demonstrated disregard for Lily's emotional well-being as evidenced by her actions on graduation day and her attempts to hide critical financial information. The judge, After a brief recess to review her notes, returned and delivered her ruling. She would grant James sole legal and physical custody of Lily, award him 100% of the joint assets under the valid prenups clause, permit Lily to access the scholarship trust funds without interference, and impose a modest fine on Marissa for contempt of court due to her failure to disclose relevant financial records. A decision that left Marissa staring in stunned silence as her mother, who sat in the front row, wept quietly with relief at the courtroom's vindication of her sister and niece. As the gavel fell, James rose, offering Lily his hand, and together they walked out of the courtroom into a world newly reformed. Lily's future secured by a combination of legal rigor and a father's unwavering devotion. And Marissa left to reckon with the consequences of having gambled her family's life for an illusory romance. Outside, reporters snapped photos while neighbors offered congratulations, and James shielded Lily's smile as they exited into the afternoon sun, their bond unbroken, their dignity intact, and their secret revenge fully realized. Marissa's double life had crumbled under the weight of truth, and the life James and Lily would now build together would be founded on honesty, resilience, and the hidden bombshells that had brought them here. 6 months after the courtroom victory, James Whitaker woke before dawn to the gentle hum of his alarm clock. Sunlight still a pale promise through the bedroom curtains, and he lay for a moment listening to the quiet house that had once been filled with tension and betrayal. Now it held only the soft breath of his daughter Lily, sleeping soundly in the next room, safe under the terms of the trust he had set up in her name. He slipped out of bed and dressed in a light blue shirt and khaki trousers before making his way downstairs, where the kitchen light flickered on, as if in greeting. James poured himself a cup of coffee and settled at the oak dining table, spreading open the local newspaper that still carried stories of community milestones. Stories James sometimes read with a smile, grateful to be part of this town without fear of scandal. At precisely 6:30, the front door opened and Lily padded down the stairs in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She offered her father a sleepy but sincere, "Good morning, Dad," and he handed her a mug of hot chocolate, careful not to spill a drop. They spoke quietly about her new summer class schedule at Wichita State University and the small art project she planned to enter in the campus fair. As Lily described her ideas, a mural depicting the phases of healing after loss, James felt a swell of pride. He reminded her to review the grant application he had arranged through his consultancy for her art supplies, and she beamed, her eyes bright with possibility. After breakfast, James drove Lily to the community art center, parking in a shaded spot near blooming rose bushes that his sister Diana had helped plant last spring, symbolic markers of new beginnings. Lily waved to him before stepping inside, and James watched her go, heart lighter than it had been in years. He then headed to Caldwell Financial Transitions, the firm he had founded with 2 associates, in a refurbished storefront a few blocks away. As he unlocked the door, he thought back to the dark days when Marissa's sudden announcement at Lily's graduation had shattered everything. Now, the office was vibrant with activity. Women seeking guidance on managing finances through divorce, widowhood, or career shifts, exactly the clients James had dreamed of helping. He greeted his team, Sarah organizing client files, Marcus reviewing case notes, and Julia updating social media announcements for an upcoming workshop on budgeting after life changes. They shared a quick morning huddle in the conference room, discussing the day's appointments and the new webinar James had scheduled for next week, Building Your Financial Foundation from Scratch. This work, he reflected, was more meaningful than anything he had done as a corporate finance manager because it helped women regain control of their lives. Midday found James across town at a meeting with the school board where Lily's proposed Broken Home Scholarship was being voted on. He sat in the back row, quietly supportive, while Lily presented her case, using data she and her father had compiled, showing that students from unstable home environments often faced financial and emotional hurdles that undermined their academic success. She spoke in clear, measured tones, referencing her own experience with the scholarship trust that had allowed her to focus on her studies without fear of tuition shortfalls. The board members exchanged thoughtful glances, and one by one, voiced support for the initiative. When the vote was called, the motion passed unanimously, and Lily blew out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. After the meeting, board members approached her with congratulations, and James placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, proud of her strength and vision. On his way home, James stopped at Marissa's former house on Maple Street, a house he now owned outright thanks to the prenup's infidelity clause. He parked at the curb and walked up the path, noticing that the grass was overgrown and the paint chipped. In the garage, he found a dusty box of items Marissa had abandoned, a collection of her favorite novels, her weathered running shoes, and a small jewelry box that James opened to find the necklace he had given her on their 10th anniversary. He tucked the necklace into his pocket, planning to mail it to Diana for safekeeping, then set the rest of the box on the porch with a note reading, "Items enclosed. Please collect at your convenience." As he walked back to his car, he felt a sense of closure wash over him. The house that had once been the scene of his deepest betrayal now stood empty, a testament to the consequences of Marissa's choices. Later that afternoon, James returned home to find Lily seated at the dining table, surrounded by watercolor paints and brushes, working on her mural sketches. She looked up and grinned. "The scholarship will start this fall," she said, her voice bright. "We'll be helping 10 students in the first year." James nodded, placing his briefcase on a chair. "That's wonderful," he replied, moving to sit beside her. He admired her sketches, a broken chain transforming into a blossoming tree, its branches reaching upward. "Your art tells our story," he observed gently. Lily smiled. "Maybe people will see that they can break free too." James reached over and squeezed her hand. Evening arrived with a cool breeze drifting through open windows. James decided to take a walk down to the park where Lily and he used to play catch when she was younger. The path wound along a small pond, its surface reflecting the oranges and pinks of sunset. He paused on the wooden bridge and looked down at the water, thinking about how far they had come, from the day Marissa had shattered their world to this peaceful moment of quiet reflection. He pulled the necklace from his pocket and held it in his hand for a moment, then gently dropped it into the water, watching as it sank and disappeared. It was a symbolic release, letting go of the last fragment of his past marriage. As darkness fell, James returned home to find Lily waiting with 2 mugs of chamomile tea. They settled into the living room, where photo frames on the mantel now held pictures of them at Lily's graduation, at the community center opening, and on a recent father-daughter hiking trip in the Flint Hills. Lily curled up beside him, tea steaming in their hands. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" she asked softly. James considered the question. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I don't miss where I was. I miss the woman I thought she was, your mother, but not the reality she chose." Lily rested her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad you fought for us." He kissed her hair. "I would do it all over again." Just then, his phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Granger. The appellate window had closed, and Marissa had chosen not to appeal the ruling. The divorce was now final and binding. James set the phone aside, feeling a final door close. He looked at Lily, whose breathing had slowed in sleep, and whispered, "Sleep well, kiddo. Tomorrow is another new day." In the quiet darkness, father and daughter sat together, safe, secure, and ready to write the next chapter of their lives, free from betrayal and built on the hidden strength that only truth and love can provide.